Figured it
Oh,
out.
you got it, Carlos.
Okay, great. So thank you all so much. I think that's important work, but just highlighting, we want to make sure that we stick to facts. There are also a lot of things that have been happening around the county that we want to highlight in terms of, Mr. LaRue's death and things like that, and the response of students as far as the new CRO program, because I think that's going to be really important to take into consideration, especially when it comes to policing in schools. I just received a message. Dalvin will likely get on much later, and if that, just because he's boarding, he's traveling, so we might not have an update from that subcommittee today. Just wanted to give you all a heads up. So I'm gonna pass it on to the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee. So Alicia, if you wanna.
Yes, and Caroline is here as well. Eric, I'm just going to say, let's keep him in our prayers. I'm sure that he's fine, but he was unable. He's always here at all the meetings, and he was unable to make the last subcommittee meeting.
I connected with him today, so
great.
I assume
maybe he'll come later, but Carol, he has done some terrific work with us and for us on behalf of the subcommittee, and so he began a draft collating our responses to the Equal Law Enforcement for All recommendations that were submitted in their audit, and Caroline has graciously agreed to take that over. So we are still working on that. And the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee is also looking at who we would like to have for our next speaker. We are focusing on Black law enforcement officers. We want to hear from them. So that is what we met, Caroline and I met, and agreed upon. So, and Caroline, do you want to add anything?
No, that's great. I just going to say I've reached out to Noble. I haven't gotten an answer yet, but I'm going to keep trying. I don't have a personal connection. So if that doesn't work, I'm going to go through other people that I know that do have personal connections and see if we can move it that way. I was hoping they'd be directly responsive, but not yet. But I did email them at the end of the day, like Friday at 6 o'clock, and here it is Monday. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, that's great. I also wanted to say as an aside, Jen, I did attend the Cahoots training. I enjoyed it very much. And I too, what I had heard was that the staffing is not exactly where, at least if I'm recalling correctly, the county executive commented that the staffing is not exactly where they would like it to be optimally. For having crisis specialists.
Yeah, nobody wants these jobs.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
they opened it and they had like 20 applicants for the first thing. It's very hard to find these jobs, especially when there's an element of danger involved,
Yes.
right? And so, yeah, it is tough, and they're getting a lot of younger folks that are new. So they're undergoing a lot of training. I was lucky to be included in some of their training, and it's intensive, and they're doing a lot of work. Yeah, getting them up to snuff. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's people that have been in the business don't want these gigs, people that they're tough ones to fill.
Yeah, but that's awesome. It's an awesome effort. So that's it for us.
Can I just chime in? I'm sorry I had to step away. My dog acting stupid, but so I may have missed some of this, but the NAACP met with Dr. Crow about these jobs. We found out that that of the 6, 5 had been filled. 1 was remaining. Training was ongoing, and he seemed very optimistic about putting people in place. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Like I said,
That's really good news.
It is good.
Yeah, those are the 6 new social workers, and in the next year's budget, there's room for 6 more. They're asking for 6 more too. So that's good. It's happening. It's happening. Just can't do it overnight. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all your work and everyone really. I know outside of doing pack stuff and being involved in this way, you're also involved in your personal lives and getting all these things to make sure that are happening. So we're just going to be moving on to the next item on the agenda. And we had a long discussion on the traffic stop enforcement last meeting. Um, and I don't know if we just really want to talk about how we're going to get public input, right? But as far as updates when it comes to them giving us more clear answers, they're not going to be able to do that until the October meeting, just for a bunch of reasons. We went back and forth with MCPD in terms of what information they have access to and when they can get it. So they will be here for the October 11th meeting to answer those questions. So if you all want to start the conversation about how we will include public comment when it comes to these requests, when it comes to these stops. And I don't know if, the Sherry or Robin, y'all want to have kind of lead in this conversation when it comes to that, since that's the work that you have been doing and you were gracious enough to put it together.
Well, I'm sure Sherry has stuff to say, but let me just say two things. One, I have read the OLO report, and I do think it does a lot of really valuable work. And we have discussed the notion of doing 2 meetings a month or 1 main meeting and something else a month. I would really like to have a chance for the OLO people to brief us before the police come in October. So that's one thing.
That's going to be kind of so we went back and forth with them as well with that. They need to brief the Public Safety Committee first, and that's going to happen October 14th, I believe.
October 14th. I thought it was September 14th.
And it's right before, it's right after the October 11th meeting that they'll have with us. So unfortunately,
okay.
we won't be able to be briefed.
I think, Sherry, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I think that it is helpful if we determine some things. Yes, the OLO folks will not be able to brief us until after they brief the council. But from the email I saw, they seem very open to briefing us.
Yeah.
I didn't detect any hesitancy or pushback from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes sense to me if we have them brief us before we meet with the police again to talk about this data request. Because otherwise we're kind of spinning our wheels. The OLO may be able to address some of the underlying questions that we have about the data. So, and they may be able to give us are a lot of ways to have a public hearing, right? There's no one formula. The public hearing doesn't have to be us talking. The public hearing can be a format that invites OLO, that invites the police, and with some guided questions from us. Let them explain to the public what these things mean.
Sherry, can I suggest something here? I don't think it's a good idea to have both the OLO and the police at the same meeting. I think we might do better to do the following. I totally take your point that getting the OLO briefing before we get deep into this is a really good idea. I think that's an excellent idea. So what about this? Why not push back our own meeting, our own October meeting for a few days or a week until after OLO, and then OLO can come brief us. And then we can have the police come in November. And
So-
that way we can do something if we want to about a public meeting, later this month, or we can take testimony or open the door for testimony. I'm not sure we have to have a meeting. We just may want to ask for submitted testimony, video or written.
So
Whatever you-
that would be, so what you're saying, Robin, is October 25th, which it would be the following meeting after the 11th, to have folks from the police department, chief and them come and speak with us? Or would you want to
No.
use that date for OLO to come and brief? us?
OLO. I want a full meeting with OLO before we talk to the police. And I think the police is whatever the next meeting is.
And that's,
after that.
the 25th is kind of our short meeting, so that would make
Yeah.
sense to have a presentation that day.
Yes.
I totally agree with what Robin has said. This is Caroline, just to say, I think the sequencing would make a lot of sense. We'd be more educated. We'd have data that even the police would have to admit is hard data. So I would, if there's a motion, can we move or should we just by consensus? I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll move to motion for us to have OLO brief us on the report on the 25th. Is there any second?
And
Seconded.
Second,
and also to ask the police to reschedule their briefing with us until the following meeting in
And
November.
that would be November 8th. So let's move
Yeah.
to vote for both together.
Yeah.
So one, have OLO come on the 25th, and then have the meeting with Chief Jones and the police department on MCPD on that would be the 8th, I believe, November 8th, which is the second Monday.
I'll
so
second that.
Okay. Anyone else? Everybody good? Okay, fantastic. So that makes the most sense.
Yes,
So
should vote
You
though.
want us to vote on it in the
Yeah.
chat?
Yes, please.
sounds good. I didn't have to vote because I moved on it. I'm just used to voting. But really quick, so I know, Robin, you also mentioned in that time we can gather public input.
Yeah.
So let's kind of have a conversation about how to do that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't have to have a meeting like Robin said, but if we do ask for public input, video, written, however, it's going to be a big lift when it comes to outreach for all of us, to make sure that people in the community are coming out and sending their testimony. So I just want to hear from everyone how you feel about doing this this way, because we would need to have it by ideally before November 8th, so that they,
Yeah.
MCPD has a heads up, they can see what we've been sent. And also it gives enough time for people. So it would be about a month from now. So how do you all feel we should move about getting this public comment and et cetera?
Well,
So can I ask, what is, okay, so far what we've agreed to is to have OLO or seek to have OLO brief us on the 25th. And then to have the police, and then to have a meeting with the police on November the 8th, right? Okay, so is the thinking that between the 25th and November the 8th, we would seek public comment? Or is the thinking that after November 8th, we would seek public comment as a basis for a public hearing?
no,
What
I
is
think-
it we're seeking
I-
public comment about?
I think earlier, I think I would like us to receive public comments by the 8th. From
That's what I
now
was
until,
thinking.
from now until the 8th. And I think the idea is for us to tap into the community as best we can. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to build more coherent outreach. It's like a practice round or a first go or second go, and to simply seek stories and data and questions and concerns from the community in a very broad way.
That way, what I'm understanding is that way we kind of have everybody's input at the table
Yes.
when we're having this conversation. with MCPD.
Before we meet with the police.
Yes.
Right.
Right, so, and then and that's what I'm trying to get to. So the goal of gathering the public comment after the OLO briefing and before we meet with the police, I'm assuming, is to be able to take those concerns, to present those concerns to the police. Do those things become a part of our meeting with them? Or is this separate and apart? I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
what the
I'm
reason for the
imagining,
flow.
yeah, Cherry, I'm imagining that after the meeting with the police, we will have, you know, done our community outreach. We'll have looked at OLO. We've raised a number of specific questions already with the police. They're going to brief us. At that point, we will be ready to write recommendations and statements about what we want in terms of traffic enforcement. And I was imagining that we would have data, such as it is, whatever there is, but we would also have input from the community to bolster whatever it is we are going to recommend, so that we will have material that is more like case studies or individual testimony or group testimony that will help us to frame there's kind of statement that we're going to put forward. So it's like, you know, bolstering material, really.
And I saw
I
Vernon.
have a question.
I have one too.
I have a question as to what we present to the chief. What do we expect to happen to the police? You know, because some of the information I've read has some union implications, negotiation kinds of things, and I'm just not sure. I mean, would we have anything different than the police department is going to see in the OLO report that they've already seen, or you know, data that they've already got? So I'm just trying to get a heads up on what it is that we are looking to do.
I think we'll have new data that is not in the OLO report, both on the incidents of traffic stops and accidents and that kind of stuff, but also now on follow-up from the courts about what happens as a result of traffic stops. That wasn't addressed by OLO, understandably, because there's no apparent connection between MCPD's data and the court data. So I think we'll have new things to say, I'm pretty sure. And we have a set of questions that we've already approved and sent to the chief.
Right.
And that I imagine he will want to try and answer.
Right, and just to, and we'll get to Jen, because I know you have you want to add something, but just as a response, Vernon, I think part of it is also that escalation that we were talking about in the previous conversation we had at the last meeting. It's being able to have that backing of the community, backing of the OLO report, and really get the answers that we're seeking. Go ahead, Jen. I know you had your hand up, and I know.
Do we have to have like a little bitty tiny, like November 25th to November, or I mean, October 25th to November 8th is a very, very small window in my world. Like, can we start collecting, I mean, through conversation, through,
right.
like, I think we need
I
to
agree.
utilize the link that's online that people can submit. I don't think that's being circulated enough, and it does exist. But also, are
Absolutely.
we looking for just feedback right now on traffic enforcement, or are we looking for everything people want to gripe about the police? Like, what are we really looking? I need a targeted way to ask a question.
Right. I think it's
Yeah.
the traffic enforcement, because that's what we're concentrating these questions around, and that's what the subcommittee had talked about. Go ahead, Ms. Branson.
Yeah, okay, so, and I'm glad Jen asked that first, because that's exactly what I was going to say. That when we are seeking this input from the public, I don't think it can be this broad thing. I think we need to develop like maybe 3 or 4 very specific questions that we're asking people to address in their public, in their written statements to us. You know,
Okay,
and that way, you know, I think it will be more beneficial because
Yeah.
we're likely to get responses from people that, you know, that may not directly correlate with the questions or the questions that we believe are part of the discussion for the recommendations that we ultimately want to make. So if we are fact gathering, we really need to define the universe of information that we seek to gather from folks. So I think
Can I just, this is
Targeted
Caroline,
question.
thanks. I just reiterate, I think that's exactly right. I think, you know, remember, we're a 3-year commission. So we should not try and do everything at once. Let's focus. We've got data here. If we get briefed by OLO, let's make that the subject. And the subject of our conversation with the chief and the subject of comments. And then, you know, and then because I think that we were trying to develop an agenda of sequencing. It seems like we have something in front of us. Let's do this. And if there's another thing that we want to do after that, it makes a whole lot more sense, I think, then we can actually come out with a coherent recommendation or a response.
Yeah, because that's also, I mean, in many ways, this is tied up to the things that we're talking about that are happening currently in the county. And I know it's going to happen at the state level. Obviously, it's going to impact us, even if we're doing county level work right now. Whatever happens at the state will impact us. I know that's going to be coming down the pipeline in Annapolis next year. So having our questions centered and focused for our community to give us clear feedback is going to be helpful once we have that conversation with MCPD. Robin, I know you have your hand up.
So I have 3 quick things. Sorry, I don't think I was clear. I was imagining that we would start outreach pretty much immediately and continue till November 8th. Second, I think
That's what I thought.
Sherry's idea is exactly right, and I really appreciate it. Maybe as we're the subcommittee members here on the call, Sherry, we can get together offline and write up 3 or 4 quick questions, and then those can be circulated by everyone. I have I know this doesn't seem as though it's relevant, but eventually all will be revealed. Carlos, do you or Susan have any idea where MCPD is in its procurement process for a new data system?
Chief Patel's on the phone, on the meeting, in the meeting.
Sorry?
Chief Patel. Patel.
Oh yeah, Chief Patel, yeah, was on the meeting now. It would be very helpful to know if this is all a completely done deal and you've sort of figured out your requirements and it's in the process of finishing up, or whether we're still working through it, because we're increasingly uncovering serious data difficulties and discrepancies. And if you're going to have a new system, it would be really important to address those problems. So if anybody knows, that would be really helpful.
Hi, good evening, everybody. And sorry I was a little late. There was some confusion on who was covering tonight, so I jumped in. So we are in contract negotiations with a vendor who we're not allowed to specify at this point due to the procurement process. The system that we're buying for records management is the NIBRS compliance system, NIBRS being the federal reporting standard. So a big chunk of it is going to be, kind of set in stone from a standpoint of how we have to comply with federal incident reporting. We still do, though, have a lot of latitude in how we implement or require certain reports, for certain things. And that's going to be in the development phase. That once we get under contract, which the last I heard is that they hope it'll be by December, it will then take 18 to 24 months to implement. During that implementation process is where the business design or business processes will be, created and, adapted around what we need in the county overall. Certain things like traffic stops, as an example, that data all occurs over in the Maryland State Police Delta system. So we don't have a lot of control over that. But as far as our records management system, which is our incident reporting We hope to be under contract by December and implementing in 18 to 24 months.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. And so as far as gathering public input, so we've agreed that is from now through November 8th when we meet with MCPD and Chief.
So
So
what means do we have for getting the word out other than the link that we have on the website? What
Right.
else are people doing?
And before Carlos and Susan just give us a little bit of what the outreach has looked like in the past, that way we can kind of fill in those gaps that we've talked about as well. I wanted to just clarify, Ms. Branson and Robin, y'all are gonna put together some draft questions for us to look at so that we can put those out with the outreach requests to the public, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Perfect. So let us know when. I know everyone has busy schedules, but if we can get it out in the next like couple of days, week or so,
Yeah.
that'd be
Yeah.
perfect. So give us a good 3 weeks to do some outreach. So I'll pass it over to Carlos and Susan to let us know what paths they have for outreach so that we can fill in the other gaps.
So the last time we did the public hearing, we put all the information on the PAC website. We had the council put out a press release regarding the public hearing. I reached out to individuals within the council who I know had like expansive networks. So I reached out to Luis Cardona, who's part of the Street Outreach Network. I reached out to folks at the Hispanic Citizens Academy who run that program for MCPD. I reached out to other council staff who have just been on council staff longer than I have to kind of get the word out to their networks. Yeah, that's pretty much the outreach that I did.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I know,
I'm sorry, Nadia. So what other committees or commissions can you also reach out to? I know that we've had attendees from the Silver Spring Justice Coalition, to name one. Young People for Progress. I know that we've had attendees, and Nadia's a good connection there. I know we have 2 members on the PAC who are members of the NAACP, and they're active there. What other commissions? Any other ones or other committees or organizations?
Off the top of my head, no, but I feel like, the more people who are involved in public outreach, the better.
yeah,
So if everyone can kind of reach out to their networks, that would be
Here's-
awesome.
How about a
Yeah.
PSA? What do we think about a PSA?
I think for a PSA particularly, it would just take a little bit to put it together. And that would kind of hinder us going out and getting some more information. But Ms. Branson, I know you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so here's what I suggest. We should not be doing, but ad hoc outreach is not necessarily the most effective. So,
Right.
what I would suggest is the following. That a list of those folks and the organizations they represent that have been attending our meetings be
Right.
put together. I assume those folks have placed their email addresses, or there's some way that we know who they are. If we've asked people to identify themselves. I don't know if we've asked for their email addresses, but that's number one, people who have already demonstrated interest. Secondly, yes, there are a slew of organizations in this county that have a stated interest in various civil rights, civil liberties, police reform, yada, et cetera, et cetera. And we need to have a list of those folks.
Mhm.
That needs to be sort of standard practice. You may want to contact the folks who do, who is it? I think it might be Sonia Healy. to see if she has a list of these kinds of organizations. She probably does. I would recommend asking her either for the list or to send out through her list. For those who don't know, Sonia Healy is someone who does press for the council. The other thing I would suggest is, that that the county executives press apparatus be requested to also send out a notification. And so this is and frankly, this should be standard. This is what should happen every meeting. Every meeting, these groups should be notified, because how else will people know that we're here and that we're open to receiving their commentary? I
Right.
assume, Jen has a whole separate list of organizations, of who are interested in these matters. So it really involves spending some time putting together a list that is utilized every time.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
my suggestion.
And I think Susan pointed out on the chat that it goes out to the list that the county council has. I know it's an extent. When I worked at the council, had thousands and thousands of people that this is sent to. Granted, a lot of people don't go into the email because they know it's just information. So I think that's what we're trying to get to more so. It's like the emails are going out. Likely people are getting them, most of the people that we know. It also depends who they're coming from. So that's what I'm trying to say when it comes to filling the gaps, right? What I think would be the best solution for this is if we can compile, if you can compile a list of attendees, like previous attendees, and people who have demonstrated interest and have come to our PAC meetings and stuff like that, and on an Excel sheet, just so that we can have the names. Even if you don't have their contacts, some of us might have their contacts, we can fill it in. And in that same list, just continuously add the people that we're reaching out to. This is an organizing, like as an organizer, that's the only way that I know how to do it, just like literally building a database for PAC.
And the organizations they're affiliated with.
Yeah, and organizations that we're affiliated with, so that all of us have a way, I know we don't have 24 hours to be like pack, but I know there are times in the day that are like, oh, I just met with someone, perfect person to add to the list, put it in really quick on the Excel sheet so that we can have them. I don't know how people feel about that. Jen, I know your hand is up and so is Robin's.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of people that, well, at least in my world, that are interested in this and want to know about this, but they don't come to our meeting. Like they just don't come for whatever reason. Could be a language barrier, could be disability, could be they just have 85 little children running around. You can't always, there's things I'd like to attend that I can't. I just don't have the capacity. So but people I see, friends and stuff, I mean, and this kind of goes counter to what Cherie was saying, like, they're like, what are you going to do about marijuana? What are you going to do about, traffic stops? What's happening with this? Like, I have interested people in my circle, but if we qualify it by they have to have attended our meeting in the past or something, then that
No,
goes,
no, no.
then that
No,
goes out the
no,
window.
No, that's
No,
not what
we're
we're
just saying,
saying.
what we're
Okay,
saying
good.
is start
That's just
start
a
with that,
starting place.
like a
Okay,
starting
good.
point, and then just that way
Okay.
we all have access to it,
Yeah.
and add those organizations that you're talking about, those folks that you're talking about, and make sure that this list stays with PAC, that it's not a list that's being shared so that people's information is not out there, but
Right,
also
right,
that
right.
once we're done as a commission, us, right, in the next 3 years, if there's going to be a following commission, they have something to start with, and there's a group of people that we know are, have vested interest in this process. Go ahead, Robin, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the use of local listservs. There are several in my area. I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of them across the county. And then there's Nextdoor, which tries to, be a listserv for everyone. And I wonder if one could do both. We can you know, I can reach out to the 4 or 5 listservs that I'm connected to, or I know people at. I'd be happy to send them, you know, send them the questions. And I think at the bottom of it, maybe put a little sign up thing for our own list for people who are
That's a
interested
great
in
idea.
that thing. So, you know, I think on all of our materials, on our press releases and whatever, the last line should be, if you want more, you know, send an email to this address and we'll sign you up. I'm sure
That's a
that's
wonderful-
illegal. I'm sure that's illegal, but
That's a really good idea. Carlos and Susan, let us know if that would work, like a quick Google form, which is name, email, you know, phone number, just quick information for PAC that we can have, maybe a bit.ly even, that's easy for us to pass around to our friends and have people sign up to. That would be helpful along with the Excel sheet. So we can have the Excel sheet and have this form also add the names onto it. I know that's possible. So let me know if that works or if that would present an issue. Okay, so we'll have the list. Robin and Sherry will send us the questions, the draft questions. So everyone add anything that you want to add to it, and let's try to move quick on it. So we'll give folks like 24 hours to respond to that email. That way we can send the questions out to our personal friends, to whoever we're going to be reaching out to individually. And then at our next meeting, we can have just a quick check-in about where our lists are, where the list is in terms of people that have signed up or people that have used the link. That way we can continue to track those things. Does anyone else have any other input or anything else to add for how to gather information from the public for this draft?
And just one last thing, and the important thing is that we really want people's comments. They don't have to attend. But
Absolutely.
we really want them, we want to hear from them.
And make it, you know, we
whatever
can make
form
it
that may
clear.
take.
We can make it clear as a preface to the questions that are being asked, you know, you don't have to attend the meeting. It's going to be recorded. So there will, you know, it will be there for you to know that we did bring up your story, whatever that might be, but also you have the time to send it in if you can't be present that day. And I guess that's a good question. How do y'all feel about having a space for people to join a meeting or having anything like that? Or do y'all just want to gather information this way?
yeah, I
But
don't
we
think.
have to allow people to join the meeting. I mean, it's open meeting rule. There's no,
Open meeting.
No, I mean a
We-
public, like a public hearing to go with us asking for public comment, if there's any interest in doing that. I know there wasn't at the beginning. I just want to make sure that we're good on just gathering information this way in terms of outreach.
Prefer to see us stick to an agenda of traffic stops, because when we just open it up to anything, we'll get stuff where somebody parked in my parking space and I call the police and they told me.
gonna
they
get that
couldn't do
anyway.
nothing about it.
Yeah,
We're gonna get that
unfortunately, we likely will, but I think the questions that Sherry and Robin are drafting are gonna try to prevent or add a layer so that we can catch those ahead of time, and they're gonna be focused on traffic enforcement and what we're talking about in this instance. So that should help out. Okay, if no one else has anything to add to this part of.
And the other quick part is,
ahead.
will you be able to focus it so we get Montgomery County answers?
Yeah, I think an
Because
added.
jurisdiction is so tight between, you know, Prince George's, Montgomery, DC, that we want information that will give us a heads up on Montgomery County.
And I think we can add that, Carlos, to the Google form, just a zip code. That is going to help kind of weed out if there's anyone that for some reason in PG, you know, put an input in there or anything
Well,
like that.
even Rockville City, you know, you don't know, Rockville City is so weirdly positioned right in the middle of MoCo, you know, that could even be,
Gaithersburg
that
too.
would confuse me because I'm in fluidly, you know,
Yeah.
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 Well, you got
Okay.
Tacoma Park, you got several
Right.
jurisdictions,
Gaithersburg.
Chevy Chase, Gaithersburg, and all
Yeah.
that. So
Instead of zip code, you can do city. That might be a little bit easier. And you can add a note at the top if you're in, you know, Gaithersburg City, Rockville. Most people that live in those cities know they live there mostly. So if you tell them that this is pertaining to the county, that would be helpful at the beginning.
Just one
But
last
but
question.
I would
too.
also
I
like
know-
to know what's happening with those jurisdictions, because Rockville police, they patrol 355. They are on, I've seen them on 270. Gaithersburg police, I've seen them all over. So when we talk about police, people don't care whether it's a Montgomery County officer or a Rockville. They just know they got a traffic stop by a police officer.
Right. And I think that's a deeper conversation that needs to be had, because that's the same thing that we ran into with, we had an incident happen in Gaithersburg. And MCPT was able to say, well, that's Gaithersburg City Police. And I think that's a deeper conversation to be had. I don't want to get in the weeds of that right now, because it is important for us to talk about. So if you want to add it to the notes, Carlos, just to make sure that at some point we circle back onto that and put it in new business at some point, we should definitely talk about it. But in terms of this, oh, Alicia, go ahead.
Just one brief question, because I had asked Carlos at one of the prior meetings if there's a way, if there's any kind of procedure in place that would help people feel safe. You know, like there's not going to be any reprisal for them speaking their truth, telling what has happened to them or sharing their story. And we talked about several things. Did we come up with anything concrete? Like, I know that they can't testify anonymously, you said.
Mhm. But allowing people to submit like audio or video recording with their camera off, just anonymously. They don't have to put their name or any identifying information. I guess they could put down their zip code or something, some other geographical identifier, but they don't have to put their name. That doesn't have to be like a mandatory field.
And granted, this is the reason why outreach for this particular topic is always an issue. That's why it's going to take all of us to have individual conversations for people to actually do this. As you know, YPP had the police documentation incident project, and I think Joe from there was here just a second ago, but we ran into a lot of hurdles and we had it be anonymous. You know, so it is difficult to gather these type of stories from folk, but that's where we come in terms of doing our individual outreach and talking to people and saying, hey, we need this, whatever it might be. It's not going, your list or your information is not going to be shared. That's not what we're doing. But also explaining the importance of knowing that these things are recorded, the importance of the fact that we don't have the data that we need right now. And this is going to help us push for that important data. So again, the outreach is going to take all of us for people to submit testimony and submit comment.
Yeah.
All right. So with that being said, I think we can move on to reviewing the Government Alliance on Racial and Equity Toolkit. Did everyone get a chance? I know it's a lengthy, it's like 180 or 170, don't remember, pages.
Yeah.
So I know it's lengthy. So even if you kind of went through a portion of it, I would really want to hear from folks how you all feel about it.
And did we receive the final race audit from the Equal Law Enforcement for All? Did we ever?
No,
Did
it hasn't come out yet. As
Not
far
yet.
as I know, it's due in October.
Okay.
Then Shabab, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Nadia. Could you just sort of contextualize the racial equity toolkit? Like, is this something we're looking to recommend to folks or something we're looking to do ourselves?
Yes, so we had a conversation a couple of, I think it was a month or so ago, about using a racial equity lens. So this toolkit will allow us to understand why it's important in terms of putting policy together. So how do we direct ourselves as a body using a specific lens of racial equity, so that we're able to recommend, so our recommendations are in line with a certain vision through a certain lens. And so we wanted to share what the Government Alliance on Race and Equity had put together, so that we're able to understand this a little bit deeper and see if this is something that the commission is interested in doing, if we want to have a lens similar to this and really where folks are at. So it's going to be incredibly important because I think it sets a precedent for other commissions, one, and two, the council already does that, right? They have the racial equity lens that they use for all of their policies. So we were really trying to get ourselves aligned with that, but figuring out how we do that, I think is the important part, and having somewhere to start. I think this is a good place to start the conversation at. But thank you for the clarification.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, frankly, I don't know if we need to go there at this point. You know, I mean, I understand the importance and I understand the motivation. I also understand that the council and the county executive have staff devoted to doing that. And so I'm not sure I'm not sure we get a bigger bang for our buck if we attempt to do that too. You know, whatever our recommendations may turn out to be, you know, as I understand the county's racial equity analysis framework, the question is, does this policy or procedure or spending budgetary item have adverse impact, have an adverse impact on a racial or ethnic group that had not been clear, you know, that there's something underlying, there's something that may not be obvious, you know, so that's the focus of what their analysis is. I don't see how that necessarily is something that that we have to do too. I mean, mainly because I don't see how it helps our work. I mean, I think it's nice and everything, but I don't see how it helps our work.
Can I, this is Caroline, I might suggest, I think it was really useful and interesting to read, and I thank you for sharing it with us. I think maybe it's premature for us to think about it, and maybe I'm with Sherry. Maybe we should come back to it when we're closer to recommendations and think about whether there's a framing that sets up our recommendations that we might want to adopt at that point in time. But it seems like we should be getting to the meat of the, you know, kind of substantive stuff. And then I think the presentation and kind of how we orient ourselves with, I think is very valuable. We should, but it may be just because we have so much to tackle before we're actually providing recommendations, maybe we can come back to it.
To add a slightly different perspective, what I was getting from the racial equity toolkit is slightly different than my understanding of what the county does, which is at the end, you have a policy or you have a budget item, and there has to be some sort of statement of what is the net impact in terms of racial equity. To me, the equity toolkit was more about an approach. So it's kind of saying, suppose you have a room of perfectly anti-racist, they breed anti-racism for breakfast, lunch, and dinner people. That doesn't necessarily mean that their approach to their work is anti-racist in every single facet or every single step. And that to me was what this toolkit was about. Was more, you know, things, to give you a specific example, I'm looking at the first appendix, right? It's talking about how you involve stakeholders as you're analyzing data, how we determine benefits or burdens. So sort of making stuff that perhaps we're already doing or decisions we're already having in our heads, but making them more explicit. And what I was imagining is we would spend this time together discussing whether it's worth doing that as a commission or not. So we're not assessing our final policy recommendations to see the racial outcome of those. We're discussing whether we think it's worth our time to do racial equity analysis on our approach to our work.
Right. And that's exactly it. And I think, obviously, as Ms. Branson was saying, we are coming to these spaces, right, representing different communities, really on our own, and understanding that this is about racial equity, that this is about justice, that this is why the commission was put together. But I think this is legitimizing that and putting it in a way so that in the future, whoever is part of PAC is held accountable in some ways to this racial equity lens, so that we're able to continuously analyze the issues that we have in the county through this particular lens. Obviously, like I said, all of us in this space have that understanding. I think we do. And I think we've tried to approach every single issue that we've come about from that lens, understanding that. However, I don't think it's written. I don't think we have it somewhere where it's saying the PAC uses this particular process or whatever it might be. And it can be helpful for the future. That's really mostly my perspective, but I do want to hear from you. I think Ms. Branson's input is super important. Is it worth it to do this right now? Do we get to the meat of the work that we're trying to do, like we're doing with traffic enforcement? I mean, you see how long it's taking us to get a recommendation on traffic enforcement, and that's just one portion of one subcommittee. And so if we move on to hiring, when it comes to the hiring process, it's going to be a similar process and it's going to be as lengthy. So do we want to spend time on how we approach these conversations, or do we want to spend time on the meat of the work? So I really want to hear from you all.
Yeah, I mean, I've already said, I don't think it's helpful. I mean, I really, I think that if people want to read it independently and use it in their personal analysis of the things we deal with, it might be helpful to them. But to put our stuff through another layer of analysis, I think would really undermine the timeliness of what we're doing. And I just don't see it as a critical step in our work. I think it's kind of baked in what we're doing. I think the racial equity piece is kind of baked in. And it's, it's just kind of extra. And it just seems to me we don't have time for a lot of extra.
Okay.
That was going to be my comment, is why I felt like we were doing the work of racial equity. And in every meeting we have, and all of our analysis and the work we do in the subcommittees meetings, the speakers that we have come speak to us, canvassing the community, inviting people to our subcommittee meetings, encouraging that, as well as even with what we're doing here, the extra effort of the discretionary policing committee getting their questions together on behalf of PAC, sending that out to the community and trying to get those responses and comments before we prepare for the OLO's presentation. I felt like we were in line with GARE, with the toolkit.
Right. And I think what Eric just shared is super important to think about, because that would include more training for us to go through, because there is a process to get more in depth into this work. And I understand the hesitation, because it is extra. It is extra work to be able to have to sit down for folk who are already doing that, who are already using that lens, who are already working through that. But there isn't a guarantee, and I'm not saying the folks in this space, right? I'm saying there isn't a guarantee that in the future that's going to continue on happening. So maybe this is something we put in the back burner, that we talk about, next year, maybe at the beginning of the year, as things are slowing down, or in the future, just so that we are able to set some precedent for future commissions, specifically for future policing advisory commissions, to be able to have that to hold them accountable, because I'm hearing, generally the sentiment is we don't want to spend time on that. We want to spend time on the work. So
I would say that this committee was probably selected and appointed through the equity lens.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. It was already set when we were created, essentially. Right. Does anybody else have anything? Go ahead, Shabab.
Sorry, I know I've been speaking a lot on this particular topic. I completely agree with Vernon. I think, we were selected for our expertise in racial equity issues. We were also selected for our expertise on policing issues, but we did have a very extensive and formal training on that. So I want to sort of think about, what is the value to taking intentional time to reflect on this? I think even just as an exercise as a group, it can sometimes be worthwhile, even if we're not necessarily learning new concepts, even if it's a practice of engaging in the same concept together. Perhaps not something for us to do right now, if I'm reading the rest of my colleagues correctly, but perhaps, if there is another 3-year commission put together and we do think about statutory requirements for them to go through, and we're expecting a group that was hired on the basis of their policing policy expertise to go through a training on how the police conduct their business, maybe we should also expect them to go through a training on racial equity.
Right. And I think just to piggyback on what Shabab is saying, you're absolutely right. We've all had training on individually. And I've gone through intensive trainings in terms of racial equity and what does that mean to be able to catch on my implicit biases, right? And the things that I have to continuously deconstruct and call myself out on. And so let's move it to the future, but definitely have something that I definitely want to push for this to be something that is at the core, especially when we're starting to meet in person. This could be a 1 meeting training. It doesn't have to be super long, and we can have it to add to our repertoire of things that we bring to the table in every space that we're going to be a part of, whether it's here, whether it's outside of PAC, but we're part of the community. So I think it is important to have the time, like Shabab said, to sit down and be in community and have these conversations as we're doing this work. Does anyone else have any other input on this particular topic? Okay, so with that said, we're going to, since we moved basically the calendar for this for traffic enforcement, that the Public Safety Committee, I'm sorry, I have pregnancy brain. I told Dalvin that this morning. I completely forget my words
You're doing fine.
half of the time. So bear with me, please. It is not a myth. It's absolutely true. So on November 8th, we're going to have our meeting at that point with MCPD. So by then we should have everyone's input, whether it's the public, OLO, so that we're able to carry that throughout. I wanted to ask if people are going to be able to watch or attend the briefing that OLO is going to do with public safety. Can you remind us, Susan, when that is? When they're meeting? October 11th? Am I right?
It's October 14th.
Yes.
And it's before the joint T&E and public safety committees.
Oh, okay, it's before both of them. So I just want to know if folks are going to be able to attend that. I think it's going to help us a base before they come out and
Via Zoom, right? Yes, then yes. Yes,
so
I have it on my calendar.
I know Susan and Carlos are going to be able to send that out to us.
And you and Dalvin are participating in something very important on September 27th.
Yes.
And I have that on my calendar as well.
Yes, we will be. We'll be on a panel. We're going to be speaking on behalf of PAC, not on behalf of PAC, but on behalf of the work that we're doing, about the work that we're doing in the county. I'm trying to see if there anything else from the last meeting that we needed to talk about in terms of new items that I wanted to update you all. Nope, that's it. All right. So in terms of new business, we talked about Public Safety Committee. So we've been talking to council staff about this process on how we're going to do policy recommendations, right? So I think at the end of the day, that's the big part of the work that we're doing. I think we've kind of created a process through this traffic enforcement that we've been doing through the subcommittee, but I want to hear from you all if anyone has had any time to think about how we can have a clear process of recommending these policies to the council.
I think Eric started the process. That was a good prototype for us to follow with the first public hearing that we had regarding drug arrests.
Drug arrests.
And I think that was I thought that the general consensus was that was the prototype, that was the good model for us to follow, that had very clear structure. That's just in
terms of it ending and being policy recommendations. I think that's mostly the kind of the next step, like how do we do that next part where we've gathered information from everyone. So
after we've gotten the public to attend. Right. Yeah. Well, we did. Right. That was the only thing that we kind of had been disappointed about, that we did not get a great turnout, especially from persons who were most impacted.
And we're trying to
I
replicate
digress.
that in this process,
Yeah.
right? But so that we can do that moving forward, obviously we're gonna focus on outreach, but what do we do after we have all this information, right? We're gonna gather all of
Right.
this, we're gonna get
I
OLO.
think the ERIC process is pretty good. Basically, the subcommittee takes all the material, writes up a brief statement and set of recommendations grounded in what by then should be quite a lot of data, and presents it to the PAC, where we should spend a meeting discussing it, changing it, voting on it. And hopefully at the end of that, we will have something that we can send the council and everyone else.
Okay, and we've noticed what response we've gotten from the council in terms of once we have important information we want to pass on to them. So how do we want to create some pressure so that once we have these policy recommendations, we know what's going to happen to them? Meaning we know whether they're going to be introduced, whether they're going to be talked about, what's going to happen.
Well, let's be blunt. Each of us was explicitly recommended or appointed by an individual council member. So I would suggest that each of us take on the job of talking to our councillor, or in my case, Mark Elrich,
Right.
and say, look, this is what we got, this is what's coming, and this is why it's important. And that's, I think, as far as we can go.
And
I
Susan,
wonder if
go ahead, Shabbat.
in addition, it would make sense to ask for some subcommittee time in terms of the council subcommittees, and maybe Dalvin and Nadia or whoever are the officers at that time, maybe speak with them or sort of formally present to them. I know we've been sending communications, but perhaps something in real time might.
And that's where we've been stuck on. I think personally.
Yeah, I had asked about that too, I think at a meeting. Can we get the county council, any county council member to come to the meeting or to dialogue with us about what we're
It's
doing?
the other way around.
And the
Other way around.
response, I'm sorry, the response has been mostly, we can get staff to come and meet with us and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's been kind of the response. But I guess what maybe Susan can help us here. But before I go there, Ms. Branson, I don't know if you have something to add.
Sorry, yeah, so what the council does or doesn't do depends on what we recommend and how we recommend it, right? So if we are if our recommendation is we would like for you all to consider legislation to do X, Y, Z,
Mhm.
then that's something they can take up or not, right? I mean, we've made a very specific recommendation in their wheelhouse, right? I think, but if we're recommending a policy change, that may not be within their wheelhouse. It may be within the executive branch, right? So it really kind of depends on what the recommendation is and what action we're seeking. Right? I mean, no legislative body is going to take up anything that is less than directed and specific,
Right.
and within their wheelhouse, says the former congressional staffer and former council member. So I'm not sure, there is no general answer to this question. The answer to this question will depend on what the recommendation is.
I think it's apropos to, at this point, after just following up on what Sherry said, to repeat what our mission is. The commission's mission is to advise the council on policing matters and recommend policies, programs, legislation or regulations with regards to policing. That's literally our mission, our purpose.
And how we craft those recommendations will determine what can and cannot be done, and who can or cannot do it, right? So it is not the take home message here for me is there is no general answer to this question. The answer to this question depends on
The
what the
recommendation.
recommendation may be.
Right.
And depending on the individual recommendation, at that point, we can determine the appropriate path or the path of most of that will most likely succeed. We cannot do that in a vacuum. We cannot do that as a general matter.
Right. And I think my point is mostly because if we were created to do such policy recommendations, but there wasn't a space created for us to even give those recommendations. I mean, that was the first thing that me and Dalvin did at the beginning. We were like, it's great, we're doing this work, but how is the council, how do we know, when do we have the conversation with the council? When do we tell them these are the, and county executive, that could be, right? If it's an executive process that we're trying to go through. So, and we've gone back and forth in figuring out how we're going to meet, what do we do? And I think you're right, Ms. Branson, once we have, for this particular topic, right, once we have the traffic enforcement recommendations, I think we can model out from that point on, so that moving forward, we have a process for that pathway, for that recommendation. Let's say it's policy at the county council, let's say it's something with the county executive, so that at least we have a pathway moving forward. Susan, I know you have your hand up, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know, and Nadia knows this and Dalvin knows this, that we had talked to Council President Hucker about this. And his suggestion was, if you wanted to have some regular meetings with council staff, their respective public safety analysts on each council member's staff would probably be the best people to discuss things with, concerns, recommendations, that type of thing. But if you have something very specific in mind, that we should reach out to the council president himself and set up something. So once you've provided some formal recommendations to the council, we can request a formal meeting with the council president.
Okay, so I think that's going to be the best way. Like Ms. Branson was saying, once we have those recommendations, decide a course of action. Do we take this to the council president? Do we need to meet with the public safety staff? Shabab, go ahead. I know you have your hand up.
For sure, I do want to reiterate that I think having some time at a public meeting, whether it's of the council as a whole or of a subcommittee of the council, can be very effective. I don't know what the equivalent would be for the executive. I do think Cherie makes a good point that if we go to them and say, we'd recommend that you move on legislation that does X, Y, and Z, it could also very well be, if it's an executive matter, we recommend that you send, I don't know what the equivalent of a congressional letter of inquiry would be at the council level, but there's many tools, many policy tools at the disposal of the council that are not limited to just legislation. But I think regardless of what the specific tool is, and I'm sure people smarter than me can figure out the appropriate tool, if we can get that public facing time, right, at a public subcommittee hearing that's being broadcast for everyone, and have our officers say, we as a body have come up with this set of recommendations after a very expensive process. I think having that public time can be very valuable in raising our profile and making sure that whatever the recommendation is, gets a little bit more attention than it otherwise would.
Right. And I think Susan and Carlos just continuously update us on public hearings and things like that. That way, either one of us, whether it is an officer, maybe from the subcommittee that the topic is on, can go out and speak on behalf of PAC. We just have to kind of get on that. And we'll try to flag it ahead of time so that, let's say if there's a public hearing next month, because I know there's a 3-month calendar that the council has usually. It's a rough draft, but at least it gives you an idea on when public hearings will be. If we have an idea like a month ahead, at least we can organize around giving public comment. But I think that's, so for now, we are going to decide the course of action depending on the recommendation that we have. We'll use this particular process right now that we're doing for traffic enforcement and kind of mirror it as we move forward with other topics and issues that we pick up and work on. Are there any other things that you want to add to this particular conversation? This line, okay. Any new business? Does anybody have to add? Would you look at that 5 minutes early?
I'd just like to ask Carlos how many commission people we had on the call tonight.
We had 9.
During every voting, we had quorum for sure.
We had 9
at the
members present tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that said, I'm gonna move to end the meeting. If anybody else has anything else to say, please do so. Or second.
Second.
All right. Okay, folks. Well, I'm gonna get some much needed rest, and I hope you all do too. And we'll see each other in 2 weeks.
All right, thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.